The conference hall felt different the next day. The aliens who had laughed at humanity's ships now studied them with careful attention. Military officers crowded around human personnel, asking technical questions. Political leaders sought out Ambassador Yoon with new proposals. Everything had changed overnight. Captain Jiwoo stood on the observation deck looking out at the Incheon. The simulation had been just that, a simulation, so his ship was undamaged. But he remembered every moment of that virtual battle, remembered fighting with half his systems offline, remembered proving that human vessels could take punishment that would destroy any other ship and keep fighting. A Vexillith approached. Not the commander who had mocked them, but an admiral with darker purple scales and eyes that held genuine respect. Captain Jiwoo, I owe you an apology. We underestimated you. Jiwoo nodded slightly. You assumed technology was the same as capability. We did, the admiral agreed. We thought newer meant better. We forgot that sometimes older designs persist because they work. Your ships, they're not primitive. They're refined, proven, battle-tested. Yes, Jiwoo said simply. The admiral hesitated, then asked the question clearly bothering him. If you had been truly hostile, if you had wanted to conquer rather than demonstrate, what would have happened? Jiwoo looked at him steadily. You had 15 ships. We had 5. But we study every battle report, every tactical doctrine, every military theory the galaxy produces. We would have known your weaknesses before the fight began, and we would have exploited them without mercy. The Vexillith's scales paled slightly. That's terrifying. War is terrifying, Jiwoo replied. That's why we prepare for it so thoroughly. So hopefully, we never have to actually fight. Across the station in a conference room, Admiral Kang addressed a gathering of galactic military leaders. The room was packed. Species that had barely acknowledged humanity now wanted to hear every word she said. You're asking how we knew your tactics, Kang said, responding to a question. The answer is simple. We watched. We studied. When the Korath and Stellar Confederacy fought at HFY, we analyzed every moment of that battle. When the Vexillith invaded the outer colonies, we noted every strategy, every weakness, every mistake. You fought your wars assuming no one was taking notes. We took extensive notes. A Korath officer clicked its mandibles nervously. You studied us like we were research subjects. We studied you like you were potential enemies, Kang corrected. Not because we wanted conflict, but because we had to be prepared for it. In our history, the civilizations that survived were the ones that understood their opponents better than their opponents understood themselves. The Luminar representative shimmered with something that might have been embarrassment. And now you understand us very well. Yes, Kang confirmed. We know that your crystal ships are vulnerable to sustained kinetic bombardment because the molecular structure can't redistribute impact energy efficiently. We know that Vexillith phasing requires precise calculations that fail under sensor disruption. We know that Korath teleportation creates a brief vulnerability window during materialization. We know these things because we needed to know them. For defense, an octopus-shaped alien suggested hopefully. Defense, yes, Kang agreed. But defense done properly looks a lot like offense. The best way to prevent an enemy from attacking is to make them absolutely certain they'll lose if they try. Lieutenant Park Sujin sat in a smaller meeting with tactical officers from various species. They wanted to understand the human coordination they'd witnessed in the simulation. How had 5 ships acted like one organism? We trained together constantly, Sujin explained. Not just our own crews, but entire fleet groups. We practice until communication becomes instinctive. Until we don't need to explain orders because everyone already knows what to do. But your communication seemed almost chaotic, a bird-like tactical officer observed. Multiple people talking, overlapping conversations, informal language. That's because we're not computers, Sujin said. We don't need perfectly formatted data packets. A human can convey complex tactical information in just a few words if the listener understands the context. Pattern 7 tells my entire fleet exactly what to do, because we've practiced it 100 times. We don't need to transmit detailed instructions. And if communications fail entirely, the officer pressed, then each ship continues independently following doctrine. Our captains are trained to make decisions without orders. If they lose contact with command, they don't wait for instructions. They assess, adapt, and act. Dr. Bay was giving an impromptu lecture to a group of military scientists in another part of the station. The topic was the philosophy behind human weapons design. and the room was standing room only. You keep asking why we use kinetic weapons, Bay said. Let me ask you something instead. In your energy weapons, what happens if the power coupling fails? The weapon stops functioning, a Korath scientist admitted. And if your antimatter containment is damaged? Catastrophic explosion. And if your quantum disruptors encounter an unexpected interference pattern? They become unpredictable and dangerous. Exactly, Bay said. Every advanced weapon system introduces new points of failure. Every elegant solution creates new vulnerabilities. We chose to use technology that has fewer failure modes. A kinetic weapon is mechanically simple. A chemical rocket has few components. A nuclear reactor is robust and predictable. These aren't sophisticated technologies, but they're reliable ones. She pulled up comparative data. In our tests, a human railgun had a failure rate of 0.03% over 10,000 firings. Your plasma cannons, according to your own data, have a failure rate of 2.7%. Our weapons are 90 times more reliable than yours. The scientists looked uncomfortable, but they couldn't argue with the numbers. And maintenance? Someone asked. A human weapon can be repaired with basic tools by a moderately trained technician, Bay answered. Your weapons require specialized equipment, rare materials, and expert specialists. In a prolonged conflict, which system do you think would be sustainable? The silence answered her question. In the diplomatic quarters, Ambassador Yoon was fielding requests faster than she could process them. Defense pact proposals, technology exchange offers, joint training operations, trade agreements. The galaxy's attitude toward humanity had shifted from dismissive to desperate. They're afraid, Yoon said to Admiral Kang during a brief private meeting. They're realizing that if we wanted to, we could be a serious threat. Good, Kang replied. Fear breeds caution. Caution prevents conflict. Better they fear us and leave us alone than dismiss us and try to exploit us. Some are proposing alliance structures. They want human military advisors, human tactical doctrine, even human-designed weapons. Kang considered this. What do you recommend? Selective cooperation, Yoon said. Share some information but not everything. Help them improve their defenses but don't give away all our advantages. We want to be valuable allies, not replaceable partners. Captain Shin Ara walked through the station's commercial district with Choi Davin. The young officer had been quiet since the simulation, processing everything that had happened. Other aliens moved aside as they passed, showing respect that hadn't existed days earlier. Sir, Davin finally said, when they were laughing at us, you all knew we would prove them wrong. How did you stay so calm? Ara smiled slightly. Because we've been underestimated before, Davin. Humans are good at being underestimated. It's almost an advantage. Let others think we're weak or primitive or unprepared. Then show them the truth when it matters. But doesn't it bother you? The disrespect? Words are just words, Ara said. Results are what matter. Those aliens laughed at our ships 2 days ago. Today they're requesting meetings to discuss defensive alliances. Which do you think speaks louder? Commander Jang Yuna had been approached by 3 different species about training their fighter pilots. She stood in a simulator bay, demonstrating human flight techniques to a group of alien pilots who could barely believe what they were seeing. You're not using the assisted targeting at all, one pilot said, confused. You're flying completely manually. Yes, Yuna confirmed. Computers are predictable. Enemy AI can calculate what a computer-assisted pilot will do, but they can't predict pure instinct and reflexes. Watch. She ran the simulation again, her fighter twisting through patterns that made no logical sense but were devastatingly effective. The alien pilots tried to mimic her and failed. It wasn't something that could be taught quickly. It was the result of thousands of hours of practice, of understanding your craft at an instinctive level. Back in the conference hall, the Galactic Council called a formal assembly. Representatives from all 63 species gathered. Admiral Kang and Ambassador Yoon stood before them. The council leader, an ancient being whose species had founded the organization, spoke with a voice that carried weight beyond mere sound. Humanity, Earth, has demonstrated capabilities that have caused us to reassess our understanding of military power. The Council recognizes Earth as a significant military force and extends an invitation to join the Galactic Defense Coalition as a full partner, not a junior member. Applause filled the hall. Not the polite recognition given to minor species, but genuine acknowledgement. The simulation chamber was the size of a small moon. It created perfect virtual environments where ships could fight without actually being destroyed. Every species used it to train their forces. The computers could model damage, system failures, and even crew casualties with disturbing accuracy. 5 human ships entered the simulation zone. The Incheon, 2 destroyers including the Busan, a cruiser named the Gwangju, and a support vessel called the Jeju. Against them would be 15 ships from 6 different species, all working together in a coalition force. In the observation hall, hundreds of aliens watched the tactical displays. This would be the real test. Demonstrations against asteroids were one thing. Combat against actual military vessels with trained crews was entirely different. Commander Zhang Yuna sat in the cockpit of her fighter craft, one of 12 launched from the Incheon's bay. She was 29, had trained as a pilot since she was 18, and had logged more flight hours than most alien pilots would in a lifetime. Her hands rested lightly on manual controls, not the automated systems most species relied on. All fighters, this is Yuna. Remember your training. Unpredictable patterns. No computer can predict pure human instinct. Her squadron acknowledged. They spread out, not in the neat formations alien fighters favored, but in a loose, chaotic scatter that looked disorganized but was actually carefully practiced. The simulation began. The coalition force moved in confident formation. 3 Vexilith dreadnoughts in the center, 4 Luminar crystal ships providing energy screen support, 5 Korath vessels with their teleportation drives, and 3 Stellar Confederacy destroyers rounding out the force. 15 ships against 5 with superior technology. On paper, humanity had no chance. They're advancing in standard Delta formation, Lieutenant Park Sujin observed from the Incheon's tactical station. Admiral, they're expecting us to either run or try to match their formation. Then we'll do neither, Admiral Kang replied. She was commanding from the simulation room, her voice carried to each human ship. Execute Dispersion Pattern 7. The 5 human ships scattered in completely different directions. The Incheon dove down in the 3-dimensional battlefield. The 2 destroyers split left and right at maximum thrust. The cruiser accelerated up, while the support ship seemed to retreat. In the observation hall, aliens murmured in confusion. This wasn't a retreat, but it wasn't an attack formation either. What were the humans doing? The coalition force hesitated, uncertain which target to pursue. This momentary confusion was exactly what humanity needed. Fighters. Engage, Yuna commanded. Her 12 craft, which had been hiding in the Incheon's sensor shadow, suddenly accelerated toward the coalition fleet. But they didn't fly in straight lines. Yuna twisted her fighter through a corkscrew spiral that no computer would predict because it made no tactical sense. Her wingmen followed their own erratic paths. The coalition point defense systems, controlled by predictive AI, tried to track the fighters and failed. The computers calculated where a craft should go based on logical tactics. But Yuna wasn't being logical. She was being human, using instinct and split-second decisions that no algorithm could anticipate. Her fighters pierced through the defensive screen and launched missiles at close range, targeting the junction points between ships where the energy screens overlapped weakly. 2 Korath vessels took damage immediately. Their hulls breached in multiple locations. They were rated as combat ineffective by the simulation computer. The aliens in the observation hall sat up straighter. All ships, converge on Point Gamma, Captain Jiwoo ordered from the Incheon. The scattered human vessels, which seemed to be running away, suddenly changed course and accelerated toward a specific point in space. The coalition force tried to reorient, but they were designed for head-on engagements, not this kind of 3-dimensional chess game. The 5 human ships arrived at the convergence point from 5 different directions, trapping 3 coalition vessels in a crossfire. The Incheon's railguns fired, the destroyers launched missiles, and the cruiser added its own kinetic weapons to the barrage. The concentrated fire from multiple angles overwhelmed the coalition ship's shields. Energy screens could only face one direction at a time. The simulation registered 3 more vessels destroyed. 5 against 15 had just become 5 against 10, and the battle had only been going for 3 minutes. Sergeant Oh Junho waited in the simulation of the Busan's Marine Bay. He was 33, heavily built, and had trained for boarding actions that the galaxy considered obsolete. Most species settled space battles with long-range weapons. Humans had trained for every possibility, including ship-to-ship combat. Busan close with target Alpha, Admiral Kang ordered. Captain Shinara, commanding the Busan, didn't hesitate. Her destroyer accelerated directly toward a Vexilith dreadnought. The aliens thought she was attempting a ramming attack and tried to phase through space to avoid it. But Lee Minwoo, monitoring from the Jeju, had predicted this. Activating sensor disruption now. The support ship released clouds of metallic chaff, electromagnetic pulses, and sensor-jamming particles. The Vexilith ship tried to phase but couldn't calculate the safe destination accurately. It materialized only partially phased, half its mass in normal space and half still shifted. The simulation computer rated it as catastrophically damaged. The Busan matched course with the dying dreadnought. "Marines, go," Shin ordered. Junho's team launched in small boarding pods. In the simulation, they breached the Vexilith hull and fought their way inside. The aliens hadn't trained for this. Their ship's interior defenses were minimal because no one fought this way anymore. In 5 minutes, Junho's simulated team captured the enemy vessel's engineering section. In a real battle, they could have set explosives or sabotage systems. In the simulation, the computer simply marked the dreadnought as captured. The observation hall was silent now. This wasn't going how anyone expected. "They're adapting too quickly," a Korath military analyst observed with growing concern. "Our forces change tactics and the humans counter immediately." Kim Hannell, coordinating communications from the Incheon, was the reason for this. She had spent years training for rapid battlefield communication. Every human ship was constantly sharing data, updating each other, adapting together. The coalition ships communicated too, but through standardized protocols that took time. Human communication was faster, more intuitive, almost instinctive. "Concentrate fire on the Incheon," the coalition commander ordered, a Luminar strategist whose voice carried an edge of desperation. "Remove their flagship." 6 coalition ships focused their weapons on the Incheon. Energy beams, missiles, and exotic quantum weapons converged on Captain Jiwoo's vessel. The humans couldn't dodge everything. The Incheon took damage. Hull breaches in 3 sections. 1 engine offline. Shield generators destroyed. The simulation showed the ship is heavily damaged. "We're hurt bad," Sujin reported, her voice tight. "Main weapons at 40%. Propulsion at 60%. In the observation hall, aliens nodded. The human flagship was crippled. Surely now they would withdraw. Instead, Jiwoo's voice came over the fleet channel, calm as ever. "All ships continue offensive operations. Incheon will maintain fire." The damaged flagship kept shooting. Its remaining railguns fired. Its missile tubes launched. Even with half its systems offline, it was still combat effective. "How are they still fighting?" a bird-like alien asked in disbelief. "Their primary systems are destroyed." Dr. Bay, watching from the observation deck, answered. "Because every system has backups. Every weapon can operate independently. Damage doesn't cascade through the ship. It's compartmentalized. The Incheon can lose 70% of its capability and still fight with the remaining 30%. The cruiser Gwangju, which had been seemingly out of position, suddenly appeared behind the coalition formation. Engineer Nam Taeyang had been running the engines at dangerous levels, using every trick he knew to position the ship perfectly. "Firing solution locked," the Gwangju's weapons officer reported. "Nuclear warheads away." 3 nuclear-tipped missiles struck the coalition fleet from behind, detonating in a pattern that created overlapping electromagnetic pulses. The energy screens flickered and failed. The ship's systems crashed and had to reboot. In that 5-second window of vulnerability, the human fleet struck. The destroyers, which had been circling the battlefield like sharks, dove in with kinetic weapons firing continuously. The Jeju launched electronic warfare attacks that crashed navigation systems. Yuna's fighters regrouped and rearmed from the Incheon, made another devastating attack run. When the simulation ended, the tally was clear. All 15 coalition ships were rated as destroyed or captured. 3 human vessels were heavily damaged but still combat-capable. The other 2 had only minor damage. The observation hall was absolutely silent. Admiral Kang stood up. "Thank you for the opportunity to demonstrate our capabilities in realistic conditions. We're ready to discuss the results." A Vexilith admiral, not the commander who had mocked them earlier, spoke slowly. "You fought like you expected to lose." "We fight like we expect everything to go wrong," Kang corrected. "Because it usually does. And when everything goes wrong," the admiral continued, "you just Keep fighting anyway. Yes, Kang said simply. That's what we do. The reception hall after the demonstrations was filled with uncomfortable silence. Aliens who had been laughing hours earlier now stood in small groups, speaking in hushed tones. Some were reviewing the demonstration data on their personal devices. Others were simply staring at the human delegation with new eyes. Dr. Bay Sora stood near a refreshment station, holding a glass of something blue that the servers had assured her was safe for human consumption. She was 35, with sharp features and the confident posture of someone who understood the mathematics of destruction better than anyone else in the room. 3 different alien military theorists had already approached her with questions. A Korath officer, insect-like with multiple eyes, clicked its mandibles nervously. Dr. Bay, your kinetic weapons. They violate the accepted principles of modern warfare. Energy weapons are more efficient, more precise, more powerful per unit of mass. On paper, Sora agreed. But warfare isn't fought on paper. It's fought in chaos with damaged systems, failing power supplies, and desperate situations. Tell me, what happens to your energy weapons when your power conduits are severed? The Korath officer's antennae drooped. They cease functioning. Exactly. Our kinetic weapons are loaded and ready. They need minimal power to fire. If our main reactor goes offline, we have backup power. If that fails, we have battery reserves. If those fail, we have mechanical firing systems. Our weapons keep working even when everything else is broken. Another alien joined the conversation, a floating crystalline being from the Luminar Collective. But surely the extra mass of carrying physical projectiles limits your operational capacity. Sora smiled. It does, but it also means we're not dependent on exotic matter, rare elements, or complex energy containment systems. We can manufacture ammunition on any planet with basic metals. We can resupply anywhere. Your antimatter warheads need specialized production facilities and magnetic containment that can fail catastrophically if damaged. Ours are just metal and explosives. Across the hall, Lee Minwoo was having a similar conversation with a group of military intelligence officers from various species. He was 40, quiet, and had spent the last decade in Earth's intelligence division studying every military conflict in the galaxy. You've been watching us, a Vexilith intelligence officer accused. You knew our tactics. Of course we've been watching, Minwoo said calmly. We've studied every battle report we could access, every tactical analysis, every after-action review. Did you think we were just going to show up unprepared? But why focus on, forgive me, such outdated technology? Another alien asked. Minwoo pulled up a holographic display. 3 years ago, the Korath Unity fought the Stellar Confederacy in the Battle of Prime. The Korath had superior energy weapons and better shields. They should have won. What happened? One of the Korath officers present spoke reluctantly. A solar flare disrupted our power systems. Our weapons went offline temporarily. And in that temporary window, the Confederacy won the battle. Minwoo finished. Or look at the Vexilith invasion of the outer colonies. Your phasing technology is impressive, until someone floods the battlefield with sensor-disrupting chaff. Then you can't phase accurately and end up materializing inside solid objects. The Vexilith officer's scales darkened with embarrassment. Every advanced system has a critical failure point. Minwoo continued. Something that, if disrupted, makes the whole thing useless. We designed our systems to have no critical failure points. Everything has backups. Everything can operate independently. If you cut our ship in half, both halves can still fight. Captain Shinara joined the group. Her destroyer fleet had performed well in the demonstration, and several alien commanders wanted to speak with her. She was followed by her tactical officer, a young woman named Kim Hanul, who looked overwhelmed by the attention. Captain Shin, the Luminar representative, approached. Your ships demonstrated remarkable durability, but surely you sacrifice firepower for that resilience. Ara shook her head. We sacrifice efficiency, not firepower. Our weapons are less elegant than yours. They require more mass, more maintenance, more crew to operate, but they deliver comparable or superior destructive force, and they do it reliably. How much damage can your vessels sustain and remain combat effective? The alien pressed. Ara glanced at Admiral Kang, who nodded permission. We ran simulations. A destroyer like the Busan can lose 30% of its hull, have half its weapons offline, lose main power, and still fight effectively for hours, because every system is compartmentalized. Every section can seal off independently. Every weapon mount has its own power supply and fire control. The implication settled over the assembled aliens like a heavy blanket. These weren't just primitive ships with good aim. They were warships designed by a species that expected to take heavy damage and keep fighting anyway. Dr. Bay moved to the center of the gathering crowd. "Let me explain something about human history," she said. "We spent thousands of years fighting ourselves. Nation against nation, ideology against ideology. We got very, very good at war. And we learned one fundamental truth. The side that wins isn't always the one with the best weapons. It's the one that can keep fighting after everything goes wrong." She pulled up historical images. Ancient human wars. Ships burning but still firing. Soldiers fighting with broken weapons. Cities under siege that refused to surrender. "We come from a world where survival meant adapting to any situation," Bay continued. "We built our space fleet with the same philosophy. Assume nothing works as planned. Assume the enemy is smarter than you expected. Assume you'll take damage you never prepared for. And build systems that work anyway." A reptilian alien from a species humanity hadn't formally met yet spoke up. "This is a philosophy of desperation, not strength." "Yes," Admiral Kang said, stepping forward. She had been watching from the sidelines, letting her officers explain. But now she took command of the conversation. "It's absolutely a philosophy born from desperation. From species-wide conflicts that nearly destroyed us. From wars where we had to win or cease to exist. That desperation taught us lessons your species never had to learn." She looked around the hall, meeting the eyes of various military leaders. "Most of you achieved interstellar travel without much conflict. You met other species and formed alliances. You built your militaries for peacekeeping, for showing strength, for deterrence. You haven't fought a total war in millennia. And you have," the Vexillith commander challenged, though his voice lacked its earlier mockery. "We fought total wars for thousands of years," Kang confirmed. "Only recently in the last few centuries did we achieve global peace. And even then we remembered the lessons. We built our space fleet knowing that peaceful times don't last forever." The octopus-shaped alien spoke thoughtfully. "You're saying your military isn't designed for the galaxy we have now. It's designed for the galaxy you fear might come?" "Exactly," Kang said. "We hope for peace. We work toward it. But we prepare for war, real war. The kind where there are no rules, no fairness, no elegant duels between evenly matched opponents. Just survival." Kim Haniel, who had been quiet until now, added nervously, "Our communication systems use 17 different protocols and can function on everything from quantum entanglement to simple radio waves. Because in battle we assume advanced systems will fail. Your point defense systems," a bird-like alien observed. "They seemed remarkably effective against the missiles in your demonstration." "They're designed to engage thousands of targets simultaneously," Captain Shin answered. "Because we assume any enemy will try to overwhelm us with numbers. Each gun mount is independent, can target independently, and continues operating even if the central computer is destroyed." The gathering was growing larger as more aliens approached to listen. What had started as a small conversation was becoming an impromptu lecture on human military philosophy. Dr. Bay brought up more tactical data. "Let me show you something else. Our ships have no single bridge. We have 3 command centers distributed throughout each vessel. If one is destroyed, another takes over instantly. Our captains can command from engineering, from medical, from anywhere on the ship." "That seems redundant," the Korath officer said. "Yes," Bay agreed. "Extremely redundant. Also extremely effective. In our simulations, enemy forces targeting our bridges found that destroying one accomplished nothing." Ambassador Yoon, who had been networking separately, rejoined the group. She had been speaking with political leaders rather than military ones, but she had been hearing similar reactions: concern, reassessment. A dawning realization that humanity wasn't the primitive newcomer everyone had assumed. "There's interest," Yoon whispered to Admiral Kang, "in a practical demonstration, a simulation. They want to see how human tactics perform against actual galactic military doctrine." Kang raised an eyebrow. "A war game?" "More than that. They're proposing a coalition force, multiple species working together against a human fleet, full simulation with realistic damage modeling. They want to test if we're really as good as we claim," Kang said. "Can we win such a scenario?" Yoon asked. Kang looked at her officers. At Shin with her destroyers, at Minwoo with his intelligence data, at Bay with her theories, at Jiwoo still calm and The demonstration zone was a section of empty space marked by floating beacons. Inside it, several old asteroids had been placed as targets. They ranged from small rocks the size of houses to one massive chunk of stone and iron, nearly a kilometer wide. There was also a derelict alien battleship, centuries old, that had been towed here specifically for target practice. Captain Jiwoo's voice came through the hall's speakers. Earth Defense Force ready to begin demonstration. The aliens settled into their seats. Some were still smiling. Others looked genuinely curious now. The 20 human ships had formed a strange pattern, spread out in a wide sphere around the target zone. From the flagship Incheon, Lieutenant Park Soo-jin studied her tactical display. She was 32, quick-thinking, and had a gift for seeing patterns in chaos. Her fingers moved across her control panel, coordinating the fleet's movements. All ships reporting ready, Captain. Begin Sequence 1, Jiwoo ordered. The Incheon rotated slowly. Its main gun turrets, which looked crude and mechanical compared to the energy weapons everyone else used, locked onto the smallest asteroid. There was no dramatic buildup of power, no glowing energy fields. Just a simple firing solution. The guns fired. The sound didn't carry through space, of course, but in the conference hall, speakers recreated what it might sound like. A deep, heavy thump, then another. And another. 6 rounds fired in rapid succession. In the demonstration zone, the small asteroid shattered. But it wasn't just destroyed. The analysis computers, which every species in the hall was watching, showed something interesting. Each round had hit within 3 millimeters of the previous one, at a range of 30 kilometers, moving at speeds that made energy weapons look slow. The murmuring in the hall changed tone slightly. Interesting, the octopus-shaped alien observed. Kinetic weapons with remarkable precision. But still just metal projectiles. Sequence 2, Jiwoo said calmly. This time 5 of the human ships fired together, not at asteroids but at empty space. Missiles launched from their hulls, hundreds of them, spreading out in a cloud. The aliens watched, confused. What were they shooting at? Then the missiles curved. Each one had its own tiny engine, its own guidance system. They began moving in complex patterns, weaving around each other. Several of the alien military experts leaned forward in their seats, suddenly interested. Engineer Nam Taeyang, watching from the Incheon's engine room, smiled to himself. He was 45 and had been maintaining ship systems since he was 20. Everyone thought human propulsion was primitive. They didn't understand that primitive meant robust. His engines could run on half their fuel injectors destroyed, could function with 3 of their 4 reactor cores offline, could keep pushing forward even when everything was on fire. The missiles reached the medium-sized asteroids. They didn't just hit them. Each missile split into 6 smaller warheads, and each warhead hit a different point on the targets. The asteroids cracked apart in perfect segments as if cut by invisible blades. The hall was quieter now. The Vexilith commander wasn't laughing anymore. Your missiles have multiple independent warheads, the Luminar representative observed, and you maintain control of each one individually. That requires significant computational power. Yes, Admiral Kang said from the human section. She didn't elaborate. What she didn't mention was that each human ship had 17 backup computer systems. If the main computer failed, another one took over instantly. If that one failed, another one was ready. Human ships were designed assuming that everything would break. Because in real combat, everything always did. Sequence 3, Jiwoo announced. The human fleet began to move, not in the elegant flowing patterns that other species favored. They moved like hunters. The ships split into 3 groups, each group moving at different speeds and in different directions. It looked chaotic at first, but then Park Soo-jin's coordination became clear. The 3 groups were moving in a pattern that would trap an enemy in the center. They would attack from multiple angles simultaneously, forcing any opponent to split their defenses. And the speeds they were moving at were faster than anyone expected from ships that looked so bulky and heavy. How are they accelerating so quickly? Someone asked. Those chemical rockets shouldn't be capable of such maneuvers. Nam's voice came through the speakers answering the question. Our ships don't rely on a single propulsion system. We have main engines, maneuvering thrusters, emergency boosters, and reaction control systems. If one fails, the others compensate. We can lose half our thrust capacity and still maneuver effectively. Several alien military officers were taking notes now. The human ships converged on the largest asteroid. But they didn't fire immediately. Instead, they orbited it, testing different approaches, showing how they could maintain formation even while moving at high speed around an obstacle. It was a display of coordination that suggested countless hours of practice. Finally, Park Soo-jin gave the order. All ships concentrated fire on target Alpha. 20 ships fired together. Kinetic rounds, missiles, and something else. Nuclear weapons. Small ones barely a few kilotons each, but placed precisely. The explosions in space were brief but intense, and when they cleared, the massive asteroid was gone. Not just broken, but vaporized. The hall was completely silent now. Sequence 4, Jiwoo said. Final demonstration. The human fleet reformed, this time into a defensive sphere. The targeting computers locked onto the derelict battleship. It was an old Korath Unity vessel, its armor rated to withstand energy weapons and missile impacts. It had been tested earlier and confirmed to still be structurally sound. One human destroyer, a ship called the Busan, moved forward alone. On its forward hull was mounted a weapon that looked like a long metal rail. A railgun. It was technology most species had abandoned because energy weapons were considered more efficient. The Busan lined up its shot. There was no charging time, no power buildup, just a mechanical process of loading a projectile and running electricity through magnetic coils. The railgun fired. The projectile was a solid tungsten rod, just 20 centimeters in diameter and 2 meters long, but it was moving at a significant fraction of the speed of light. When it hit the derelict battleship, there was no explosion. The rod simply punched through the armor, through the interior, and out the other side. The hull was perfectly round, edges glowing from the heat of friction. Then, half a second later, the structural integrity of the entire ship failed. The battleship broke apart, its spine shattered by a single shot. Data streamed across every alien's display. The penetration power, the energy delivered. The complete inability of conventional armor to stop it, and the realization that human ships carried dozens of these weapons. Captain Shin Ara, commander of the destroyer fleet, allowed herself a small smile. She was 38 and had been arguing for years that humanity's primitive weapons were actually advantages. Today, the galaxy was finally understanding. The Vexalith commander stood up slowly. His purple scales had paled slightly. That weapon, it cannot be jammed, cannot be deflected by energy shields, cannot be phased through. Correct, Admiral Kang said simply. The octopus alien spoke carefully now, all amusement gone from its translated voice. Your ships are designed for actual combat, not demonstrations, not displays of power, actual war. Yes, Kang confirmed. The Luminar representative shimmered with what might have been concern. And your nuclear weapons. How many does each ship carry? Enough, Jiwoo answered from his ship. What he didn't say was that each human vessel carried enough nuclear warheads to level a continent. Because human military doctrine was simple. If you have to fight, fight to win. No elegant duels, no honorable single combat. Just overwhelming, decisive force. The hull remained quiet as the human fleet returned to formation. The demonstration was over, but everyone present understood that something had shifted. These weren't primitive ships piloted by backwards humans. These were warships built by a species that understood violence at a fundamental level. Ambassador Yoon stood up. Earth thanks the Council for the opportunity to demonstrate our capabilities. We look forward to further discussions about mutual defense arrangements. The way she said it wasn't a request. It was a statement. Earth wasn't asking to join the galaxy's military alliances anymore. Earth was announcing that they had something valuable to offer. The day humans showed their outdated fleet and shook the galaxy HFY Sci-Fi. Story outline, 5 parts. Part 1. The mockery setting, though. Galactic Council chambers orbit the neutron star Terminus Prime. 63 species gather for the Centennial Military Exposition, where civilizations showcase their latest warships and weapons technology. Main characters: Captain Han Ji-woo, commander of the human fleet delegation, weathered veteran with 30 years of service Admiral Kang Mirai, Fleet Admiral of Earth's United Defense Force, strategic mastermind Choi Devon, young weapons officer aboard the flagship, Ambassador Yoon Hyejin, Earth's diplomatic representative to the Galactic Council plot points. Humanity arrives with their fleet. 20 vessels that appear antiquated by galactic standards. Ships use chemical propulsion, kinetic weapons, and nuclear reactors. technology most species abandoned millennia ago. The Vexalith Empire's commander, a reptilian being, openly mocks the human vessels as relics from a primitive age. Other species laugh at humanity's combustion tubes and metal projectiles. The crystalline Luminar Collective refuses to even acknowledge human presence. Captain Jiwoo maintains stoic professionalism. Despite the humiliation, Ambassador Yoon requests a demonstration slot, which is grudgingly granted for entertainment value behind closed doors. Admiral Kang smiles knowingly and tells her officers, "Let them laugh. They'll learn soon enough." Part 2. The Demonstration. New characters. Lieutenant Park Soo-jin, tactical officer with a gift for improvisation. Engineer Nam Tae-young, chief engineer who maintains the outdated system's plot points. The demonstration begins with other species showing off energy shields, antimatter weapons, and quantum displacement drives. The Vexalith demonstrate their ability to phase through solid matter. The Luminar show weapons that manipulate space-time itself. When humanity's turn arrives, the mockery intensifies. Captain Jiwoo orders the fleet into a formation no one recognizes. They begin with a simple display: precision kinetic bombardment of target asteroids. The aliens find it quaint, until they analyze the data. Every shot hit within millimeters. At extreme range, humans then demonstrate outdated nuclear missiles with multiple independent re-entry vehicles. Park Soo-jin coordinates a maneuver showing the fleet's unexpected agility despite appearing bulky. Engineer Nam reveals their ships can operate in conditions that would disable more advanced vessels. The final demonstration: a railgun strike that punches through a derelict battleship like paper. The chamber falls silent as species recalculate their assumptions. Part 3. The Revelation. New characters. Dr. Bae Sora, human physicist and military theorist. Lee Min-woo, intelligence officer who has studied galactic warfare. Captain Shin Ara, commander of the destroyer fleet. Plot points. During the post-demonstration analysis, species begin asking uncomfortable questions. Dr. Bae explains human military philosophy: redundancy, adaptability, and proven reliability. Lee Min-woo reveals humanity's secret: they've been studying galactic warfare for decades. Every advanced weapon system has a weakness. Energy shields fail under sustained kinetic assault. Quantum drives can be disrupted. Antimatter containment is vulnerable. Human primitive technology is actually deliberately chosen. It's unglamorous but nearly impossible to counter. Captain Shin demonstrates how human ships can function with massive damage that would cripple superior vessels. Chemical propulsion means no exotic fuel requirements. Kinetic weapons can't be jammed. Nuclear reactors are robust and simple. A Vexalith military analyst realizes with horror, human vessels are designed for total war. The mock combat simulation is proposed: humans versus a coalition force. Admiral Kang accepts immediately, requesting only that the simulation use realistic damage parameters. The galaxy watches with sudden, nervous interest. Part 4. The simulation. New characters. Commander Jang Yuna, fighter wing leader Sergeant Oh Junho, marine boarding specialist.
Kim Hanul, communications officer who coordinates fleet actions. Plot points.
The simulation begins: 5 human ships versus 15 vessels from various species. The coalition expects an easy victory. Humans immediately abandon civilized warfare conventions. Commander Yang leads fighter craft in unpredictable attack patterns. Using manual piloting to evade AI-predicted movements, the human fleet splits up, seemingly retreating, then executes a complex trap. Sergeant O's Marines demonstrate brutal boarding tactics. The galaxy hasn't seen ship-to-ship infantry combat in centuries. Human vessels absorb damage that should destroy them and keep fighting. Kim Hanul coordinates fleet actions with a speed that suggests the humans have trained for exactly this scenario. The primitive kinetic weapons prove devastating against energy shields designed to deflect lasers and plasma. Nuclear-tipped missiles detonate in patterns that disable entire enemy formations. Human point defense systems, simple but numerous, create impenetrable fields of fire. One human destroyer, crippled and venting atmosphere, rams an enemy dreadnought at full thrust within 2 hours. All 15 coalition ships are destroyed, while 4 human vessels remain combat-capable. The galaxy watches in stunned silence. Part 5. The shift plot points. The simulation results trigger a galaxy-wide military reassessment species that mocked humanity, now frantically request information on human defensive pacts. The Vexilith Empire, which had been preparing to expand toward human space, quietly cancels their fleet movements. Admiral Kang gives a speech to the council. You mistook simplicity for weakness. You assumed newer meant better. In war, what matters isn't how advanced your weapons are. It's how well you can use them when everything is falling apart. Ambassador. Yoon negotiates Earth's position from petitioners to partners. Captain Jiwoo receives apologies from commanders who had mocked his fleet. The revelation spreads. Humanity's outdated fleet is actually a nightmare scenario. For any aggressor, Earth doesn't have a few advanced superweapons. They have thousands of reliable, redundant, battle-tested systems Dr. Bay is invited to teach at the Galactic War College. The story ends with a view of human space. Dozens of new shipyards coming online. Not building elegant energy-based vessels, but sturdy, practical warships with railguns, missiles, and thick armor. A final scene shows Captain Jiwoo on the bridge of his flagship, looking at the stars. They wanted to see our outdated fleet. Now let's show them what happens when humans actually build something modern. The implication is clear. If this is what humans can do with primitive technology, the galaxy should be very afraid of what comes next. Themes: underestimation and hubris, practical efficiency versus aesthetic advancement. The value of proven, reliable technology over unproven innovation, human adaptability and refusal to follow expected patterns. The difference between fighting for sport versus fighting for survival. Tone third-person narrative with a focus on tactical details and the shifting perspective of galactic powers as they realize their mistake. The story should balance military science fiction elements with the satisfying humanity fuck yeah moment of validation.